Welcome everybody. Welcome to JEDI Disruption, which are direct, no-nonsense conversations with leaders on technology and science. I am André Lezoureau-Pietri. I'm the director of JEDI, which is the Joint European Disruptive Initiative, which is the major European initiative for disruptive innovation. So as you know, JEDI is launching technological grand challenges to solve some of our society's biggest challenge in environment, healthcare, digital, and oceans. And so today we are absolutely delighted to have Yann, who is the CEO of Scaleway, one of the key players in the cloud area in Europe. And he's also a board member of JEDI. So very good to have you, Yann.
Thanks for having me, André. Pleasure.
So you are a key member of the French technological ecosystem. You're also a thinker on cloud and AI. Previously, you were leading a company in the artificial intelligence realm. So maybe a bit disturbing question at the beginning. We are just in the middle or just coming out of this COVID-19 crisis. Somewhat technology has been a bit of disappointing. It was not like the solution to all our problems. What's your take on this?
Well, I have mixed feelings because I've been in technology for the best of my life. I started coding, I was 10 years old. And even though I made a career out of technology, I do not believe that technology is the answer to everything. So I'm pretty ambivalent about technology in general, often because technology is rapidly evolving. And so as human beings, we have a hard time keeping up with innovation. And that means that certain parts of society, for instance, are left behind when it comes to technology that is rapidly adopted by certain parts of the population. And on the other hand, human processes are also disrupted by technology. So not just the digital divide as we know it, but also as structures. For instance, companies, some of them are on par and managing to evolve accordingly. So in general, I have mixed feelings about technology, even though I'm a technologist. Now, with the COVID crisis, what's very interesting is that we were forced to use technology to keep something fundamental about our species, which is the social bond. And I think nobody saw this coming. So Europe is behind when it comes to general adoption of technology for telecommuting, for instance, teleworking. We are behind. We are behind in the numbers. That means that it has not been adopted as widely as it has been in the US, for instance. But in this particular case, we had no choice. And so this is both an opportunity, but also a realization that we do depend on technology, even now for fundamental necessities, such as social bonding.
So I mean, before we go to cloud, which is the heart of our discussion, who are the winners of the current crisis in the technology space, and who are maybe not the losers, but what is at stake? I mean, can you develop a bit more what you were saying? I mean, there are tectonic shifts going on.
So the one underlying aspect with technology is the notion that software allows to derive ever-increasing returns because software is easy to clone and replicate. Now, companies that are well-positioned with software will gain while the others will lose. So it has a polarizing effect on general business dynamics. So typically in a phase like this one, the winners are the ones who are well-positioned and ahead, and the losers are the ones lagging behind. It will polarize the debate. Now, there is something else interesting.
Not good news for the inequalities. Inequalities will grow on a business and on a personal side too.
Absolutely. Now, there is something contrarian in this period, which is based on the fact that we live in a moment right now where we have geopolitical tensions between the US and China. And the COVID shows that we are extremely dependent on every other country, every other nation, every other construct, geopolitical construct. And so the polarization has occurred already when it comes to Europe, for instance. Europe is behind and is being played by the US and China because the US and China have a dominating position. So we have to take stock of the situation individually, and we have, and collectively as a construct. We are the European construct, and together we need to think about it globally, which brings us probably to the next topic, which is the cloud. How do we seize that opportunity to reestablish some sort of a balance between lack of sovereignty, which means lack of ownership on certain fundamental aspects, and a degree of sovereignty, because things are not black and white. In fact, we do live in a connected world, and that's for the best, I believe. But we do need some sort of balance.
So when you take cloud, for example, I mean, I saw that the latest numbers for 2019 that I got was that European providers were representing 4% of the cloud offering. I don't know if it's 3, if it's 10, but it's very low, with a tendency down compared to the big US and increasingly also Asian players. What's the future of cloud? How can the Europeans reshuffle the cards?
So the cloud is a mixed bag, right? It's the modern way of doing computing, and it does include IaaS, infrastructure as a service. It does include SaaS, software as a service. It does include PaaS, platform as a service. All of that together is the new modern way of organizing and dispatching information all over. Now, Europe is definitely below 10% globally, which means we are not sovereign for ourselves, and we are not exporting that much either. So it's a major loss for us. When I talk about balance, I think 30% would be great if we could service 30% of European demand. And why not capture 30% of the US or the Americas, Africa, and Asia? Because that would mean balance. And that would mean actual true competition at the geopolitical level. The worst thing is if we do not have, say, 30% market share, then we do not weigh anything in the conversation. So how do we leap ahead? There's one interesting aspect with cloud, which is we have reached a sort of maturity level where cloud computing can be simply thought as storage, compute, and transit. And if you take these 3 fundamental blocks of cloud computing, then you can think about the next step, which is the commoditization of cloud. And so how do we leap ahead, even though we're behind? Well, the way to leap ahead is to actually project ourselves into the next way of consuming those 3 basic units. And for us, at least that's how we analyze it, it's the multi-cloud. The multi-cloud approach means that any client using the cloud, or any structure using the cloud, can actually do so indifferently with a mixed array of providers. So one could say, okay, I'm going to use 50% on, say, a West Coast American provider, and 25% on this French provider, and 25% on this German provider. Not only does it create independency from the provider standpoint, but it creates extreme resilience in case of one of the providers falling down. As we know, the internet often breaks down, and typically it breaks down when one of the massive providers of the cloud goes down.
And I mean, I'm going to push you on this, because increasingly the big platforms are not just providing the infrastructure, as you said, infrastructure as a service, but it's the whole software layer. I mean, they are adding services which allows you to do data analytics, which provide you cybersecurity. So the agency cost of going with several providers, I mean, we really need to have a very strong proposition that people will be multi-sourcing. I mean, it's like in the automotive industry where, yes, everybody would love to be non-dependent, but at the end of the day, you have 1 or 2 providers who take the bulk. What will be is it the technological differentiation you're trying to achieve?
Well, I mean, it's really hard to race against companies that invest, 10 billion a year in R&D. So the fight will not be there. But at the same time, as I said, we reached a level of maturity where we can talk about commodities. Now, some of these players will focus on extreme innovation and trying to lock in clients. What I'm saying is that if the clients are well educated about the possibilities of multi-cloud, then they will gain freedom on the fundamental bricks, right? So they can actually do their shopping dynamically and get either the cheapest or the more available or the more European. Why not? Sovereignty is also about geography. So mix and match. Now, innovation will be about the next frontier, right? In the spirit of JEDI, it's all about the next frontier. And so the next frontier is how to think abstractly about the cloud and not about where the shuffle is, right?
So, I mean, we won't hear from you, but I will come back to you on the next frontiers. Two things were in the media and the news in the last days. Tell us a bit more about one. There was a controversy about the French government allocating the health data to a US provider of cloud, and so maybe you want to comment on this. And what was the rationale behind this decision? And on the other side, there was this French-German, which, as you know, is close to my heart, announcement of this Gaia X initiative. And honestly, I looked at it very carefully. It's still pretty fuzzy to me. So hopefully, you can give some light on this French-German initiative, which I think your company is part of.
Absolutely. So the first question is a bit tricky because I've only joined Scaleway 3 months ago. So I was not part of the initial consultations, and I was not part of the decision-making, of course, which was on the government side. Now, my understanding of the situation is that indeed, let's call them by name, they are known. It's not a secret. Microsoft was selected to provide the initial implementation, say a prototype, for the health data hub in France. Now, a number of players were consulted. We were consulted as well. And the decision at the time was that, for the requirements, the French players did not tick all the boxes. But that was 2 years ago. And I believe my understanding also is that the government always meant for it to be reversible from the get-go. Now, I'm only looking at it from today's, perspective. Choices were made in the past, and I have a lot of respect for Microsoft as a company that has been around for 45 years and has been extremely progressive and also has had a hard time to compete in general. But yes, they are a giant. So they are hard to ignore, just like the others. They're hard to ignore. And I never ignore them for the same reason. And they do provide a lot of technology to a lot of different use cases. So no problem there. However, today, again, post-COVID, it's all about taking stock of what individuals require across Europe. And individuals do require sovereignty. They do require a sort of ownership on the data. Now, certain players, and that's not Microsoft's fault, are under US governance. And that's the way it is. And if the US, for some reason, decides to pull the plug for their own sovereignty reasons, then we are out of luck. And so the government needs to think about that and revisit the subject. And they are revisiting it.
Okay. You're cautious, but thanks for this insights. I mean, I think it raises the question of the agility, as you mentioned very rightly. 2 years ago was a total different environment. How can we bring this agility into government processes? I think this is a major question for everything, including innovation. And tell us more about Gaia X.
So Gaia X,
will it be any different than all the other technology government-backed ventures, which I don't know so many that were that successful in the past in Europe?
Well, I mean, clearly it's already different. In other words, if we look at past initiatives, one of the idea was to create from scratch a cloud provider. And as we know, and Scaleway is one, example that I know well. I know the amounts. It takes a lot of cash to build a cloud provider. It takes a lot of sweat. So it's really, really hard to create a cloud provider. It's been hard for Amazon. It's been hard for Google. It's been hard for OVH. It's been hard for us as well. It takes a decade at least to build credibility in that space. Now, past initiatives, I've tried to create a European cloud provider from scratch. Didn't work. The new initiative is about building a meta cloud using existing providers. That's already very different. We've never seen that before. So it's complicated, of course. But the first idea is to say, okay, here are the European providers that actually provide a sort of proxy. And that proxy means that together, the European providers provide well over 50%, maybe even 80% of the features offered by the major three. Once you have this mapping, then we can provide a tool to educate government buyers, the public, or private buyers about the possibilities to contract with us. If you look at a major company, a global company, that company has a gigantic advertising and marketing budget. That budget creates a gloss that prevents people from seeing the actual, common features. Now, Gaia X is all about creating a common ground for the buyers. Stage one. And already we have a group that is constituted of 22 entities. Some of them are SaaS providers, some of them are IaaS providers like ourselves. So we are a founding member with OVH and Outscale in France, but there are German providers as well, and SaaS providers, as well as government institutions. Now, the German-French initiative is meant to be European. I think it was pragmatic to start with France and Germany to get a head start quickly, but then everyone else is welcome to join. The second stage of Gaia X will be more complicated. The idea is to plug our common commodities into Gaia X so that clients can consume directly from Gaia X. It's not too far-fetched. Frankly, it's not too far-fetched, but it will require extra work from us.
I mean, I like on the gloss, because there was a question that from some of the many people who are listening to us live right now about isn't reversibility from large platforms a dream or reality? And indeed, there is this it's so much more fashionable among a lot of buyers, especially government buyers, to go with one of these big platforms. So the big challenge for you at Gaia X will be probably also to create the sense that this is serious, it's ticking all the boxes that you were not ticking 2 years ago that you mentioned. Okay. You already have a great name. I mean, we started with that too with JEDI. I think it's part of the success story is to make sure that there is strong traction. One little advice, if I may, our experience at JEDI was that, and you know it very well, is that French-German initiatives only succeed if they are very, very quickly opened at equal footing with other European countries, because otherwise the other European countries sees that at the French-German, and this is a recipe for...
I believe that is the spirit of Gaia X. Again, I only recently joined the initiative. But no, I mean, the stage 2 will be complicated structurally, but the first stage already has a lot of value. And, but I would like to answer the question about reversibility. The question is, reversibility from GAFA is a dream. Well, number one, Gaia X is all about reversibility between members, platforms that are referenced at Gaia X. So reversibility also calls for the common interface. Now, if the big platforms are not part of Gaia X, there is no reversibility. If they want to be part, they will have to implement those bridges, right? That's the contract. And of course, big platforms can race ahead with innovation and keep on implementing a sort of lock-in. So reversibility at some point, and Gaia X is not regulation, but it's a sort of auto-regulation. In other words, if locating your data on European soil and being protected by European law and being excluded from the Cloud Act, well, that sort of gives a sort of reversibility option for those who are locked in. They can actually opt in to the Gaia X construct. So what really matters is reversibility going forward for the newcomers.
So I on not putting too much attention on Gaia X, but we're clearly we're supporting this, and hopefully also we can help with some of the technological
we have a
challenges that there is one topic that is important for us, which is portability of data. This and maybe other topics you would say as a conclusion. Where do you really see the technological breakthroughs that could change the name of the game in the cloud area?
Well, I mean, there are two angles. The first one is, as I mentioned, multi-cloud, which is where the design of the cloud infrastructure is thought at the unit and construct level, which is the commodity element. Now, you need modern tools to do that, and those tools are now in production, they're live. And so developers need to be educated about them and use them, number one. Number two is edge computing. Now, when we talk about multi-cloud and even Gaia X, we're not talking about next frontier stuff, right? It's a sort of geopolitical rebalancing. Now, edge computing is definitely next frontier because it will completely redefine and reshuffle the way data is transported, processed. And we've seen this before, actually. Over the past, say, 50, 60 years, it's been a pendulum between client and server, centralized, decentralized. Your smartphone is a very powerful computer, and it does process a lot of information on the edge. So the edge computing is a way to take apart the central aspect of the cloud and disseminate it. So this will be interesting to...
Topics like semiconductors, miniaturization, energy consumption of components are part of the challenges that you're mentioning?
Yes, but less so. In other words, I think the combination of super high bandwidth, low latency networking, such as 5G, in combination with compute units that are cheap enough, resilient enough to be deployed pretty much everywhere, will create new ways to process data. And so the algorithmic part of things, the software part of things, will be evolving towards that underlying infrastructure. And that's going to be interesting to watch.
Very interesting. So that's how we understand that 5G and cloud is actually very intimately connected to each other. Yann, we could go on for a long time. So thanks so much for your insights. Good luck for your new job. I mean, I think you just passed 100 days. So
yes.
Congratulations. And for all those who are watching, stay tuned for the next JEDI disruption. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.